and welcome to LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV. Your hosts this morning are Mari Victoria and Elizabeth Menning. And welcome to the show. I'll turn it over to you two and just back out and you just call me when you need me.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, welcome to LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV, episode number 8.
So we come to you every 2 weeks, right now on Thursday, 11 a.m. Central.
And we'd like to thank Bill Moran and the Bill and Callie Show and all of their sponsors. This program is produced by the Bill and Callie Show. My name is Mari Victoria. I'm affiliated with LGBTQ Northwest Indiana, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
And I'm Elizabeth Menning. I run the PFLAG Crown Point Northwest Indiana chapter, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
We will talk about topics and give you news items that are important to the LGBTQ and ally community here in Northwest Indiana.
So whether you yourself identify as LGBTQ, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, whether you know somebody who is or may be, whether you want to just be an ally, whether you just want to learn more, or whether you want to start getting connected to the community, this show is for you.
Let's do a brief overview of our content for today's show. We will start with a very important announcement about 2020 NWI Pride. And that will be followed by the news highlights. And there is one August LGBTQ related event, which I'll tell you about.
We're going to just, again, briefly mention the voting resources that you have to get registered and actually be able to vote. And then also talk a little bit about the smoking cessation.
Then we will get into our feature topic for today, which is coming out.
And when somebody comes out to you, what do you do? All right, Pride announcement. So Northwest Indiana Pride, which last year was our first year, and it was an indoor festival in Highland, was supposed to be in June this year, but of course, as with everybody, we rescheduled it for September 12th. Since things really haven't taken any sort of turn for the better in a lasting way, we have made the very difficult decision to go ahead and cancel 2020 NWI Pride altogether. We evaluated several other options and locations and audience sizes, and it just isn't worth the risk to attendees, participants, or us to try to put that together at this time.
We did pursue the possibility of a much smaller event. We realize how important it is for the LGBTQ community to have community, but unfortunately, this situation still warrants us to err on the side of caution.
Yep. That we will still try to stay engaged with everybody and maybe have you send us your Pride pictures in previous years.
We do, however, have a date picked for 2021 NWI Pride, and that is
July 10th, second weekend in July. Location is still to be determined, kind of depends on how things are going by then. But we'll announce it as soon as we can. All right, Amari, you want to start with the news?
Sure. Oh, just by the way, our announcement for 2020 NWI Pride is being made public now. It is being distributed as quickly as Elizabeth and I can get to it. We have many places, people and organizations that we need to inform.
And if anybody wants to help for next year, just let us know.
Please do. With that, we'll get into our news stories. Our first one is an unfortunate one. Black trans woman was stabbed to death while she was at a vigil for another murder victim. A Black transgender woman was murdered in Oregon as she attended a vigil for a man who had been killed several days earlier. Asia Raquel Roan Spears, 33 years old, was one of 20 to 30 people who attended a vigil in Portland on July 28 for murder victim Tyrell Penny. The vigil was held at a private residence. According to police, there was a fight at the vigil and 2 people were stabbed, including Roan Spears. Portland police tried to take life-saving measures, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her death has been ruled a homicide, and police say that there were multiple witnesses, but they encountered hostility and a lack of cooperation. No arrests have been made. At least 26 transgender and gender nonconforming people have been killed in the U.S. in 2020, according to the HRC.
And part of that is because this population is particularly vulnerable to non-acceptance, harassment, hate, being kicked out, losing their jobs, that type of thing. So they end up as somebody more vulnerable, and that's why we tend to see all these deaths.
I think it's important to keep an eye on the situation as far as transgender people being killed. So you will always get that news on this program. I'm sorry that it's always bad news, but
there's a lot of good news out there too.
There is a lot of good news. Your turn.
All right. So we have a news article about Sigourney Weaver on playing a homophobic mom turned LGBTQ plus activist. She has starred in some of the most iconic films of all time. And there's a television movie that she made a decade ago that remains very dear to her called Prayers for Bobby. It's a 2009 Lifetime movie, so it's over a decade by now. Mm-hmm. Based on Leroy F. Aaron's book, it centers on Mary Griffith, a devout Christian mother who loses her gay son to suicide. Overcome by grief and guilt over her attempts to alter his homosexuality, Mary Griffith discovers PFLAG, as well as a new calling with LGBTQ plus activism. Over a decade after Prayers for Bobby first aired, the movie was re-aired, or is being re-aired by Lifetime on July 29th. And Weaver said that meeting Mary Griffith, who passed away this year, helped her understand the character and the decisions she made. Weaver says she couldn't have imagined all that has transpired since Prayers aired. With marriage equality legalized nationwide and anti-LGBTQ plus employment discrimination banned by the Supreme Court, the actress is quick to acknowledge that legislation and court rulings are different than lived experiences, and that Mary and Bobby's story is still urgently needed. Weaver is absolutely laudatory when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community's determination in fighting for their rights and dignity. Okay, another bit of good news is that the first hospital in the U.S. has apologized for performing cosmetic genital surgery on intersex children. And intersex refers to people who are born with body parts associated with both male and female bodies and can sometimes have ambiguous genitalia. In many cases, doctors perform surgeries on those people, on the babies, to make their genitalia look less ambiguous, even if it's not medically necessary. They've often defended the practice by saying that the child will fit in better growing up. But this is all happening before anybody knows the actual gender identity of the child. And it can have very negative side effects if the baby is made to appear as one gender when they feel like another gender. Let's see, so Human Rights Watch and World Health Organization, United Nations and Amnesty International have all condemned the practice. Lurie Children's Hospital's website, it's Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, according to HRW, used to promote the surgeries to reduce the size of a large clitoris and help correct girls' anatomy. Advocates for intersex people have marched in front of the hospital since 2017. One of the organizers, Sean Saifawal, said that his undescended testes were removed as a teenager when doctors told his parents that they would turn cancerous if not removed. There's little evidence of cancer risk, though, according to the HRW. that Wall had told BuzzFeed LGBTQ that doctors do not seem to see intersex people as human. In its statement, Lurie Children's Hospital said that it recognizes, quote, the painful history and complex emotions associated with intersex surgery and how for many years the medical field has failed these children. Their statement says that irreversible genital procedures with the sole goal of changing the appearance of genitalia will, quote, not be performed until patients can participate meaningfully in making the decision for themselves. So Kyle Knight of HRW said that surgeries remain common to this day, despite condemnation from intersex people. So good job, Lurie Children's Hospital.
And just a point of information, HRW is the Human Rights Watch. Let's see, I'm doing a little change up. I've actually beginning to use a different news source. So these stories come from both LGBTQ Nation and The Advocate. There are, however, many other news sources. Next story is watch the award-winning gay short Requited on its 10th anniversary. In celebration of its 10-year anniversary, the short film Requited is now available free to stream. The 2010 film, written and directed by Sal Bardo, focuses on the character of Nicholas as he struggles to decide whether to go to the wedding of his best friend from high school, Aaron, who he's always been quietly in love with, according to its description. Upon its release, Requited won an audience award at Real Affirmations, an LGBTQ plus film festival in Washington, D.C. Previously, this film was only available through the short film compilation called Blue Briefs. Bardo told The Advocate, "It's never going to be perfect, but looking back 10 years later, I'm really proud of this film. It was a huge turning point in my career. I originally wrote it as a vehicle for myself as an actor and never thought I'd direct another one. But it was such a rewarding experience and received such warm response that it actually changed the trajectory of my career." Requited is actually available for viewing on YouTube.
So talking about movies, and especially affirming movies, we've all heard of Rotten Tomatoes. So they have something called Rainbow Tomatoes. And there are many lists out there of LGBTQ supportive and affirming movies. They have quite a set of criteria that they judge movies against before they add them to this list. But they actually have a list of 200 movies from 90 years ago to today that either has a central message about being LGBTQ, has an LGBTQ cast, members, have won awards, and convey the positive, affirmative, good aspect of being LGBTQ. So I really encourage you to check that out. It's called Rainbow Tomatoes.
Also, we're touching upon a topic which we may have mentioned in a previous episode, but is certainly a very important topic, and that is the portrayal and representation of LGBTQ plus people in the media, whether it's movies, news stories, magazine articles, social media, whatever. It's important that the LGBTQ community gets the proper representation. That's why we're seeing so many actors and actresses who are deciding to back out of projects because they don't feel like they should be playing an LGBTQ character.
All right.
Our next item, LGBTQ plus people flee Poland as homophobic president is sworn in. LGBTQ plus Poles are at a crossroads after their nation's homophobic president, Andrzej Duda, was sworn in to a second 5-year term Thursday morning. Duda ran on an anti-LGBTQ plus platform promising to outlaw same-sex marriage and bar same-sex couples from adopting children, among many other measures. Now, a significant number of LGBTQ plus people in Poland have decided to buy a one-way ticket out. While there's no exact count of how many queer people have fled the country, Polish activists told the AP that LGBTQ plus people have been emigrating to European Union countries like the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and Spain. 1/3 of Poland's municipalities have passed resolutions in recent years outlawing LGBTQ propaganda, declaring themselves pro-family. These cities, which collectively have a landmass larger than Hungary, categorize themselves as LGBTQ-free zones. This week, it is announced that 6 LGBT-free cities have lost funding from the European Commission, the executive branch of the European Union. EU Commissioner for Equality Helena Dalli tweeted that these cities conflict with EU values. In many ways, the conservative nation takes cues from nearby Russia. Politicians in both nations frequently use LGBTQ plus people as scapegoats. Legislation currently under consideration in Poland categorizes homosexuality as pedophilia. In a related story, this hasn't really sat well, even with legislators. Where is that? Oh, here it is. Polish lawmakers protested President Andrzej Duda's inauguration by wearing rainbow-colored outfits and arranging themselves to form the pride flag during the ceremony. They also wore rainbow-colored masks. The LGBTQ advocacy group ILGA has said Poland is the worst country in Europe for LGBTQ rights. Earlier this year, British embassy staff called out Poland's anti-LGBTQ policies by wearing rainbow face masks at work all day. The British ambassador said, while right now we all need to focus on fighting COVID-19, we must not forget to continue protecting the values in which we believe. Okay.
All right.
That's it for the news. I have one more item. It is concerning Wear It Purple Day. Wear It Purple Day was founded in 2010 in response to global stories, real teenagers, real heartache, and their very real responses. In 2010, several rainbow young people took their own lives following bullying and harassment resulting from the lack of acceptance of their sexuality or gender identity. One member of this group was 18-year-old Tyler Clementi, who took his own life after being publicly outed as gay by his roommate, prompting a frenzy as reports poured in of various young people sadly in the same situation. Since 2010, when Wear It Purple was co-founded by Catherine Hudson and Scott Williams, Wear It Purple has developed into an international movement. New generations of rainbow young people continue to be dedicated to promoting the annual expression of support and acceptance to rainbow young people. This year, on August 30th, celebrate Wear It Purple Day. Be part of a movement that has the potential to save thousands of lives.
And somewhat related is a awareness day coming up in October every year that is about anti-bullying, especially of LGBTQ youth. Again, a day where you're encouraged to wear purple. So in October, we'll tell you more about that. So as you know, this is election year, and we will always be telling you that it's very important to register to vote. And if you go to www.indianavoters.com, it has a variety of services you can do. You can submit a new voter registration, update your existing voter registration, validate your registration status, find your location, learn about provisional ballots, find your county contact, and determine who is on your ballot.
I think it's really important that you are able to validate your voter registration status and find your polling place. As you know, there are efforts to tamper with the U.S. Postal Service, for lack of a better word,
and to suppress voting.
And to suppress via that vehicle mail-in voting. But as well, there are other attempts at reducing the number of polling places And I even read about a story where in Iowa they have been removing voting equipment. This does not bode well. So please make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure your status is good. Know where your polling place is at. Do your research on the political candidates.
Work with each other to get to the voting place if we aren't. It sounds like we aren't going to be having vote by mail in this state.
If we do hear about it, you'll hear about it on one of our shows.
Yep. So please register to vote. Please go out and vote.
Again, we can't stress enough our affiliation and support of smoking cessation and eliminating tobacco products use, and a very important resource here in Northwest Indiana.
Indiana
in general is the quit line. That number is 1-800-QUIT-NOW. A variety of services are available for people looking to quit smoking, etc.
They have a lot of free programs that you can either take or enroll in that will help you with smoking cessation.
And I keep thinking there's a website.
Oh, there is. Quit now. Oh my goodness. We've got it on here somewhere.
Since it is a program of the state, in.gov is probably a good starting place.
www.naquitline.org.
Okay.
I thought we had that right up front.
So did I.
So, and again, the reason that we are pushing this topic is, again, because substance abuse, tobacco use is often a go-to when people are very stressed or not accepted or feeling great dysphoria, that type of thing. So the whole LGBTQ community is one of those communities that is more susceptible to smoking and abusing tobacco and vaping and that type of thing. All right, time for our feature talk.
And that, of course, is coming out. I'm sure that this is a topic that we could spend more than one episode on. We'll see what we can manage this time around. I do want to mention, although I have not gotten around to it yet, I would like to go back to each program and grab the resources that we use, the research and our documents that we create for each show, and give access on the LGBTQ Northwest Indiana website to those documents. We feel like a lot of the work that we do here is important, and although you hear it in passing on our show, we would like to make it a more permanent resource for you.
And as you know, there's different types of learners. Some people learn by listening. Some people learn by reading or seeing. Some people learn by touching and doing. So try to make it a little bit of all of that if we can.
Okay, so let's get started. Now that we've covered identity and labels, and you've discovered your identity and chosen or created the labels to describe your identity, how do you let your friends, family, loved ones, the world know about the real you? Well, here are some things to consider when you are about to embark on your coming out journey.
So just a point of interest, coming out is actually short for coming out of the closet. It's a metaphor for revealing one's sexual orientation. Now it has expanded, of course, to gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, romantic orientation, all kinds of things.
Okay, so what is coming out?
All right, you start.
Simply put, is the process by which you inform the people in your life about your true self, whether it's your sexual orientation or your gender identity. Coming out allows you to live your life authentically as the person you really are, instead of the person you've taught to be, you've been influenced to be, you've been judged to be by others and by society. Coming out can be the scariest thing that you can do, and the same time, it can be the most exhilarating thing that you can do. Coming out takes bravery, planning, and a willingness to educate yourself and about the LGBTQ community and its issues, as well as educating those you come out to. Coming out is ultimately rewarding. You finally can live authentically. Though understanding, acceptance, support, and love will not always come from all those you come out to.
So, Amari, what do we mean when we talk about the true self? I know we've talked a little bit about it on previous shows, but I mean, to me, it just means living in congruence in where your inside self matches your outside self and expression and being.
That's absolutely right. You are matching. We talked about it last episode. You are trying to make your inside and your outside match. And when you come to the realization that you are who you are, and there's no changing that your mind and your heart are no, then you want to let the world know, because all they know is the person that you've been living as, not the person you really are.
And if you aren't living as your authentic self, it causes great stress, dysphoria, angst, depression. I mean, you name it, physical, mental, emotional problems. And even for something like a silly little example is I'm a nature girl. And if I always worked indoors without a window and couldn't see outside, and I was like, okay with that, I wouldn't be living authentically, because to me, I have to sometimes get outside and get my hands in the grass and my eyeballs in the trees. And, you know, I want people to know that about me. This is a silly example, I understand, because this isn't LGBTQ, but everybody deserves to be able to be their authentic self, to have people know who they are and not be afraid to show themselves.
Or have to hide it.
Or have to pretend to be somebody else. Oh my goodness.
That stress and anxiety Elizabeth spoke of too is highly likely to be one of the reasons why the self-harm and suicide rates for LGBTQ community members is much higher than their counterparts who are not LGBTQ.
Yep. All right. So we talked a little bit about who can come out. The term is traditionally used for LGBTQ people. Again, coming out of the closet, meaning that you're showing, the whole world. Let's talk about some feelings. So
okay.
Amari briefly mentioned that it may be a very scary event. And just from personal conversations that we've had, that I've had with people, you can see, the fear and the apprehension when they're talking about, oh, I want to come out to my friends, but I don't know how. And I'm afraid they're all going to, reject me and that type of thing. So just a couple notes from HRC, Human Rights Commission. Being brave does not mean that you're not scared. It means that if you are scared, you do the thing that you're afraid of anyway. Coming out and living openly as a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning person is an act of bravery and authenticity. Some people say that you can come out as a supportive straight person. There's a lot of debate about that. We aren't going to get into that part. There is no one right or wrong way to come out. It isn't just a done deal, typically. It will be a lifelong process of being ever more open and true with yourself and others. It's something you do in your own way and at your own time. What kind of feelings are normal to have?
Oh, my. Well, they're scared, of course. We talked about that. And confused. You have to know who you are. You have to own who you are to be able to have the confidence to come out of the closet.
But it's okay to be confused too, because it's a very confusing situation.
And Elizabeth mentioned about not getting acceptance or support. That will definitely leaves people who are trying to come out or want to come out very vulnerable. On the other hand, coming out, like we mentioned earlier, can be a very empowering experience. It can be very exhilarating.
Can create senses of relief, pride, bravery,
and affirmation
of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yep.
There are some incredible benefits of being out. For example, you are able to live an open and whole life.
Or you can live it honestly, basically, finally. You develop closer and more genuine relationships.
You build self-esteem from being known and loved for our whole selves, for our true selves.
Reduces the stress that we've been talking about is caused by hiding your identity.
We are able to connect with others who are LGBT.
Or who are supportive of those who are LGBT. So you begin to be more a part of a strong and vibrant community.
And you also can help dispel myths and stereotypes about who LGBT people are and what their lives are like.
You're a person, right? When people
Absolutely.
start, they know you, they see you're LGBTQ, then they realize that LGBTQ people are people. So, so in that vein, you could become a role model for others, whether you want to or not, whether you intend to or not. Just like Amari has been flying a trans flag outside our house for the last 3 years. And especially kids in the neighborhood have noticed and are appreciative and admiring that she is brave to do that.
All of that, dispelling myths and stereotypes and becoming role models for others make it easier for younger LGBT people to follow in your footsteps.
Or even older LGBTQ people who are just realizing, Miss Amari. So, I mean, the benefits are just absolutely incredible. What I've seen in Amari since she's come out is, well, first she had the realization that she was transgender, and then when she went through her primary coming out experience, the change in her has just been absolutely tremendous. The change in other people that I've seen, through our PFLAG meetings and community events, it's just night and day. It's like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, or sometimes it can even be as dramatic as a phoenix rising from the ashes. I mean, it really is tremendous.
All those positive things, effects that we mentioned, and the benefits that we mentioned are life-changing. However, there are some risks to coming out.
Unfortunately.
Not everyone will be understanding and accepting.
Some of your family members or friends, coworkers, spouses, schoolmates might be shocked or confused, may even turn hostile.
Unfortunately, some relationships may permanently change.
Now you've experienced that.
I have experienced that myself. However, from my wife, partner, and friend, confidant, I have received nothing but support, acceptance, love, affirmation.
And an occasional kick in the butt to not be afraid to do that thing. Get out there and show yourself.
Honestly, coming out is probably not the only thing that an LGBTQ person will do where bravery is required.
Yep.
However, coming out is probably one of the events that takes the most bravery.
And especially because it's one of the first. Often, it doesn't have to be, but it's often one of the first events.
Another risk to coming out is that you may experience harassment or discrimination.
And unfortunately, as we've talked about, as you know, as you read, discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity is still legal in a lot of parts of the United States and the world. In most cases, there is no legal protection for LGBTQ people, except for now in Indiana. They're not supposed to be fired from their jobs. So HRC website, again, hrc.org, has a lot of information about the protections and non-protections in each state.
There's also one more risk that I'd like to touch upon, and that is for younger LGBTQ people, especially those under the age of 18. Unfortunately, in many cases, they get thrown out of their homes or lose their financial support from their parents.
It's an unbelievable
This
situation.
is a travesty of the greatest degree. Not only, do you suffer the rejection of your family, but you are made a homeless person or a destitute person.
And things like survival sex and other terrible things that happen when you're homeless. And one of the problems that we'll be addressing on this TV show is the lack of LGBTQ capable homeless shelters, transition housing, that sort of thing. So it is a gap in this area that we are slowly trying to make some connections to get filled.
A couple of reminders for you. The potential coming out person. You are in charge of your coming out journey. You decide who to confide in, when to do it, and how. You also decide when coming out may just not be right, necessary, or advisable.
So we've mentioned before, there's no one right way or wrong way to come out or to live openly. Choosing to come out or to be open does not mean that you have to be out at all times or to all people or in all places. All right, so now that we've scared you, again, the benefits are incredible. At some point, for your own sanity and health and existence, you will likely want to come out, at least in some part of your life. So we have a little bit of a description of some of the common stages of a coming out process. And we're going to talk about some how-tos. Like I'm already mentioned, that there's things that you can do to prepare yourself and to set up the circumstances for better success. And then we will talk about some do's and don'ts for both people coming out and people who are being come out to.
And hopefully we'll have enough time to cover that in this episode.
And if not, our next episode we will finish.
So 3 common aspects of the coming out journey are self-awareness and education. You ask and seek the answers to questions about yourself, coming out to yourself, and deciding whether and how to come out to others.
And that comes with self-acceptance too. So sometimes, I know we'll get into that, but sometimes you don't accept in yourself what you feel that you are, and that needs to be part of the process too.
Coming out, actively talking for the first time about yourself, your orientation or your gender identity to everyone, family, friends, coworkers, classmates, healthcare professionals, etc.
All right, living authentically and openly. So telling other people, coming out to them in a less structured manner, not necessarily planned, and when you feel it is appropriate or warranted. Is this your comment, Amari?
Once I was past the, I call it the planned coming out conversations, I found that I was coming out to almost everyone I met and trying to educate them as well. It
shouldn't be necessary to have to come out and share these aspects of yourself that technically are just nobody's business. But for some of the reasons that we've talked about before, where you are having to hide who you are or pretend to be somebody you're not, that's why it's important. So
how do you come out?
well, you make a coming out plan.
And what sort of things might a plan consist of?
What signals are you getting from the different people you're considering coming out to? In other words, have they been making little snide comments about LGBTQ people or issues when they've seen them on TV? Or are they fiercely advocating for somebody who's LGBTQ, that type of signal?
Or even no signal at all?
Yes.
The plan might also, I should say might, should include becoming informed of LGBTQ issues.
Why is that important, Murray?
Really, when you come out to someone, they were probably going to ask questions, and it's always very good to know as much as you possibly can know in an effort to be able to answer those people's questions.
I think that's because a lot of people have been conditioned by a homophobic society. And if you do this research, then you'll be able to, give them that accurate information, like you said. So
another part of the plan is, what do you say? Do you know what you want to say? I will say that I didn't. And I spent many nights just pad and pencil, writing out what I would say and writing out what kind of questions will people ask? What will they want to know?
I do remember encouraging her to start with, how depressed and unhappy I've been all my life? Well, guess what? And that seemed to work pretty well. She had like a page all written out, fine print, single spaced, that she was going to talk from. And that worked for the first couple times, right? And then you start shooting from the hip.
It's interesting how you develop over time, how the outcomes of your coming out experiences shape your next coming out experience. What things, you gauge what things are important to tell people and what things are maybe less important to tell people. Mm-hmm. You learn the questions that people are going to ask so you can better prepare yourself.
Mm-hmm. So having support can be very, very helpful. In case you get a negative reaction when you come out, it's great to have somebody or a group that you can turn to for emotional support, stability, strength, maintaining your sense of self-worth and that this is right is critical.
I think even a person who is not out can gauge whether a person, to some degree, whether a person would be supportive. I think the way in that person acts and lives their lives can be somewhat of a clear indication that when you tell them your coming out story, they will understand, they will accept.
Yeah. And your support structure can be family members, friends, heterosexual people, coworkers, other LGBT people. I mean,
classmates,
PFLAG chapters. So
you have to decide if it's a good time to come out. In your plan, I know from my personal experience, I scheduled in my mind and on paper when my coming out experiences were going to be. There were a few times when I actually got frustrated because in trying to set up time with these people to be able to come out to them, it would get delayed or it would get put off. So you have to decide what's going to be a good time to come out, and you have to decide whether you can be patient.
In other words, if you are going to a family funeral, that event is not about you, so you might consider not coming out at that event. I've heard that holidays are not good times.
Holidays, family gatherings.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the time or the place.
Sometimes it is, though.
Sometimes it is.
It really depends. And like we said, there's just no right or wrong answer.
We are not intentionally trying to be wishy-washy. We would love to be able to give those people who need the confidence and bravery to start their coming out journeys some concrete tips and steps to be able to come out with as many successful outcomes as possible. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Everyone's situation is different.
Now, we did have in one of our meetings, there was a person who felt they were ready to come out to their friends and talk to us about maybe doing it via text. And I think the whole group said, no, this is too important to do by text. You want to be in person. And that person said that they were afraid of what might happen physically when they came out to their friends. Well, after we all just like shocked and gasped and said, no, you should really do it in person. They did. The next day, we got a report back saying that it went great. Their friends hugged them and no problem. So that person was very glad that they came out in person to their friends.
Interesting side comment to that is that by having that personal conversation and doing some of the things that we will mention in more detail later, like trying to carve out time with the person you're coming out to where there will be no disruptions, and carving out enough time to deal with your coming out story, plus the questions that might get asked. You have some control over the conversation, the subsequent reaction after you've had that conversation with people. Doing a text, a Facebook post, potentially even emails, and anything like that that's impersonal, leaves it wide open for not only the person to interpret what you're telling them their own way, but to also promote that and spread that.
Which isn't their job. So speaking of timing, another question that we get from a lot of parents especially is, I think my child might be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer. I don't know. Should I ask them? Do I wait for them? What do I do? And generally, and hoping not to be too wishy-washy, it's better to wait for them to tell you, but there's a lot of times where people know already and they are waiting for you to tell them. But as you're waiting, you can give off some of these signals that we talked about earlier, like making positive and affirmative comments about LGBTQ people.
You're talking about the person.
I'm talking about like a parent who thinks their child might be gay, but they aren't sure. So in other words, if you think and that person's important to you, then you can also set up the conditions for success on showing them that you actually are a safe person, a supportive person, a person they shouldn't be afraid to come out to.
And that parent or friend or classmate, by acting the way they act, saying the things they say, just prove that they are open to ideas, that they are, how do I say it? They are already realize that they're in the position to be able to be accepting and supportive and loving and caring to other people in general, not just people who end up being LGBTQ.
But a lot of times they can become a protector and an advocate for you. We've had people who came out to one parent first because they knew that side of the family maybe was more accepting. And then they engaged that side of the family to help them tell the other side of the family. Like I told dad, and now dad's helping me tell mom and grandmom. And that goes that goes pretty well too. So absolutely use those resources and your supporters.
Again, that's the messaging that people give off. That is our interpretation of that. We talked about gauging the signals that are being conveyed by people. And that's exactly why some people will come out to one parent and not the other. They've gauged the signals that they've been receiving.
It's not, okay, so say you're a parent that a child has come out to, but the other parent, they haven't come out to the other parent yet. It isn't about you, even though it's terribly inconvenient and hard and difficult to keep that person's news, to be calling them by the pronouns they want to be called in private, but not in front of the other parent.
Or the name.
It's not about you. It's about this other person. So just try to keep that in mind, and work with them and help them to be able to come out to the other parent or whatever the case may be. So anyway, we talked a little bit about the reactions that people might have. So what reactions would you hope to get, Amari?
I would absolutely hope to get acceptance and support and understanding.
Okay.
I would appreciate being able to feel comfortable, reassured, confident, loved again, and validated.
Yep, that sounds really good. Unfortunately, people are people, right? We're very complicated, emotionally tangled beings. And depending, especially how you were raised and your belief structure and how you've been conditioned or taught, you might somebody might feel uncomfortable or scared, disbelieving, unaccepting.
A common one is angry,
Anxious, scared, unsure how to react, unsure what to do next.
On the flip side,
and they might just be surprised.
Reactions that often happen, and Elizabeth alluded to this, they may feel honored that you shared this part of you with them.
They may feel relieved that you finally shared this part of you with them.
If they are not knowledgeable, they may be very curious.
And like me for Amari, you might be very excited and pleased and excited. I said that twice.
I think I said loved twice. Other things that you need to keep in mind. People you come out to will need different amounts of time to process your coming out message. Sometimes you'll receive immediate acceptance, support, understanding, and love.
This is why we talked about needing to have patience earlier, that you have to be prepared to be patient, because some people do take longer.
And sometimes it takes many weeks, months, years, and sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Some people come around or express, they become supportive or accepting on their own, sometimes given time, sometimes right away. Others may need a little bit more guidance or education. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Another thing to keep in mind is that the person or people you come out to may surprise you. Those you thought would be the most understanding and supportive could potentially end up being the first people who decide that you are no longer to be associated together. And sometimes the person you thought for sure was, which way did I say it?
The person that you thought was going to be accepting actually
isn't. And the person you might believe there's no way in the world that they're going to be able to accept and understand, end up being the people who say, I'm cool with that. What can I do to help? And what can I do to support you?
Part of that is because the signals that people put off are not always in congruence with their internal self. Like maybe somebody gives lip service to accepting LGBTQ people, but then when it's right in front of them with a relative or something, then it all goes south for them.
Don't assume prejudice. So we talked about interpreting or minding the signals that you receive as a gauge of potential I was going to
Positive conditions of coming out. Acceptability.
acceptance, acceptability. Well, sometimes there may be comments that could be construed as being microaggressions against the LGBTQ community, or jokes or comments that really may not be that person's belief. So even though signals may come to you that seem negative, don't put too much weight into that. The only way that you are going to know is to come out to them. Don't overprocess.
So make sure you provide resources, or you're ready to provide resources. There's a lot of resources out there for non-LGBTQ people, which will help them understand and to learn more. We've always said that education leads to understanding, leads to acceptance, leads to support, leads to affirmation.
And advocacy.
And advocacy, yep. So, Mari, what your thoughts around that, about the resources?
There are many resources. One of the things that I did when I came out, as I felt due to the signals that there were at least a few members of my family who would have a really hard time with this, and a few of my friends as well, that I bought a book from Amazon called Transgender 101, and I supplied that. I physically gave them a copy or sent them a copy.
Whether or not they read it, that's up to them.
That's up to them, but I tried to grease the skids, so to speak, tried to bring them to a potentially quicker understanding. But like Elizabeth said, if they read it, some people just don't want to.
Right. But I mean, offering resources like this shows a couple of things. I mean, one, that it is very important to you. It's very important to you that they understand this situation, and that you prepared for talking to them, and that you are willing to work with them to come to a level of acceptance. So you need to be, I guess it shows willingness to educate yourself, and that you're willing to learn about what it all means for you, but also what it means for them. And you can help them understand more about what it means to be LGBT, and also how to accept, support, and advocate for LGBTQ people. And again, this is different for everybody. Not everybody's going to be an advocate. Some people just barely accept. But in interest of time, Amari, I think we're going to need to carry this into session 2.
I think we're going to have to.
So we have a few notes on some of the particular differences or particular aspects of coming out to your family, to your social circle, to your workplace, to your school. And then we have all those do's and don'ts that we were going to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like the do's and don'ts, although again, they may be flexible in under certain circumstances, they are a more concrete sort of to-do list.
Yeah.
That will help you make a plan and help you know what to expect, either positive or negative, and know not only what is demanded of you as the person coming out, but what is demanded of the person you're coming out to. Now, demanded is a very strong word, but
so we have a list of do's and don'ts for the person coming out. We have a list of do's and don'ts for the person being come out to, and resources for both. There's other questions that we could discuss, like, okay, what do you do if it all goes south? How do you stay safe? What it might mean if you decide to stay in the closet, this whole thing about going stealth, that type of thing. I would also hopefully like to bring in some people to share their coming out stories. So we'll be working on that.
We'll work on a vehicle by which people can submit their stories. We would love to hear coming out stories, good or bad, and would love, if possible, to share them.
We should put our email address up there really big behind us. So it's
Yes,
there
we should.
during the entire show. So we have closing materials real quick. Looking. Okay. So again, these are really trying times, and a lot of press has been given to the physical health of everybody. Less seems to be bandied about the mental health. And it's just this whole coronavirus pandemic and these times can really lead to some mental discomfort, some issues, feelings of being overwhelmed, needs to escape, etc. So just please, a mental health provider is only a phone call away. If you need referrals locally, we can do that. There's national resources. Yeah, LGBTQ, suicide prevention resources.
And these are really important to have these and know about these resources for people in these times of COVID-19, where isolation is great. Community is in a lot of ways non-existent for people in the LGBTQ community.
The ability to connect with that community.
The ability to connect with that community.
Especially now not having pride.
Physically. Obviously, there's a million ways to connect electronically.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the same.
But there are resources for young people, for young adults, for older people. And if you're looking for some sort of connection more local, there are a lot of groups that are still doing support meetings just virtually now. There are a lot of people, including the PFLAG Crown Point Board of Directors, who are more than happy to talk with you. If you have a particular question, feel free to reach out and we can, direct you to the best resource. Same thing with LGBTQ Northwest Indiana. Amari has a list of resources.
I'd like to mention that I've actually, in some ways, improved my website. I have been queried by several organizations who aren't necessarily local to Northwest Indiana, but provide services that would be helpful to LGBTQ people who do live in the area. There are now links on my website on the resources page that will allow you to go to a mental health provider, or a good site is help.org. Anyway, check it out.
Yep. Please reach out if you need to. Even if you're not sure what might come of it, please reach out. Our next show is August 27th, which is 2 weeks from now. I believe we will, unless we are able to schedule a guest speaker in or an interviewee, we'll continue talking about coming out. We will be working on putting these resources on our websites or making them accessible from our websites. And
so now that we've whetted your appetite about coming out, make sure to come back next episode for some do's and don'ts.
And if you want to talk, share your story here in this platform, please let us know. It's info@lgbtq-nwi.org or info@pflagcp-nwi.org. All right, Bill, we're ready for you.
Got to turn my microphone on. Which a lot of people wish I'd just keep it off, but anyway, get over that, pal. You know what I'm saying? One thing during this show that kind of troubles me, and you know me well enough, when I'm troubled, it's a thing that I'm troubled that it's a shortfalling in our community. one of the things um, that I am kind of challenged on is the word homophobic,
Mm.
and what I'm getting at is it, gosh, is it kind of a too soft of a label to place on someone? Because in a way, it's not phobia, because phobia is a psychological condition with a fear of. And a lot of times we're just dealing with outright hate of something different. Now,
Mm.
some psychologists may say that's based upon fear, but um, I I don't know. I don't know. I've got to say one thing I do know. It's a shortcoming in that person's viewpoint. It's actually, and I've talked to many counselors on this. This is someone that's insecure in their own feelings, whether it be they're not secure in their own sexuality or what have you. But that's my question to you. Maybe the broader discussion someday: is homophobia the correct label to be placing should that have different categories? It may be a different label for just outright hate. Um,
Wow.
That's a really good
That's
question,
a really
Bill.
good question.
Because traditionally, I mean, homophobia has embraced all, or not embraced, covered all of that, encompassed all of that.
yeah.
But especially nowadays, it seems like, there's just a lot more visible hate and hate acts.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a very good question.
Well, yeah, and it is a label because I always I've talked to um, counselors, and phobia is a clinically assigned, and that may have some clinical background for that fear. Some may be chemically related, or a something that happens within the mind, and yet some are just outright attitudes. And broader question for another day, with because that could be a whole new program.
That could be a whole
I
program.
think it's wonderful that you brought that up, though, Bill, because now you're questioning the language. Maybe we need some additional terms for the language, and I invite our audience to submit their ideas for more terminology, more labels that might better describe um, being fearful of the LGBTQ community.
Or
Yeah.
hateful.
Yeah,
Or
and
even people.
again, when I talk to psychologists, and they view the term phobia as something that is more clinical, and to me, that's a cop out in a lot of cases because it's not clinical. It's just an outright narrow-minded fear. Um, and I listen to you all talking about coming out, I hope for a world someday where it's not even a discussion. It's a transparent, a personal orientation that no one has a right to judge, no one has a right to hold opinion, and no one has a right to cause action against. That's where we need to be. Because, and Amari, this is, people know your story. You were going through some troubles with personal identification, and any counselor will tell you one of the biggest problems we have that causes a great deal of damage to oneself is not aligning with who you truly are. And by keeping this fear out there is a damaging factor. The fear of coming out, the fear of what other people think. And so I guess what I'm doing is calling for people just worry about your own problems, folks. There are people out there that are being damaged. I can personally attest to people that have actually committed suicide because of this confrontation they've had and the fear of coming out. That is wrong. So no one should ever have a fear for something that they can't control. It's their view of the world. Um, and we as a society need to get to a place where no one should fear. this whole issue. There are much more things that I could be judgmental about out there in the community, and you guys know it. I'm not going to do it because I'm the militant. I'm the guy that I get extremely militant, as people know. It's just there's more things that people should be ashamed about, particularly prejudice. Prejudice should be a shameful act that should be persecuted, should be held accountable, but yet it's not. And it's still used as a badge of honor in this day and age. And it's your shortcoming, pal. Don't bring that out into the public. You need to go get that solved, is my viewpoint, because it's causing too much damage to our community. It's nothing you put on a flag and raise up. It's something you need to hide and go seek a counselor to get solved. Because it's too damaging in our community, which already has issues. Okay, soapbox.
That's quite all right, Bill.
All right. Well, if we can reserve, maybe if you guys can on your outline reserve that conversation, I would love to talk about that.
I've written it down.
So, listen, we probably need to wrap things up. And by the way, I want to congratulate both you. You had your highest views our last show. They're now getting up there, up to getting close to 1,000, which we all knew when this first started out. The acceptance, people knowing it, it took some time to grow, but it's getting up there, which is it's a good thing. So,
well, thank you to you, Bill, and the Bill and Callie Show, and thank you, our viewing audience, for continuing to stick with us. And we hope to be able to provide for you lots of informative and interesting and useful information.
Yep.
And there has been. This is a world of information. I'm learning a lot every time we get together. Just the different things about your community are amazing. So with that, I do want to remind people how they can hear this show in the future. It is available. It will be available on YouTube. It will be available on Spotify, iTunes, and basically in audio podcast format wherever you can, where you normally get your podcast from, even Google Podcast as well. So available in many ways and forms. If you don't have time or have the ability to watch it, you can definitely dial up your podcast in whatever way you normally listen to those and listen to this as well. So with that, I guess we'll say goodbye for now.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day. Remain safe out there, and please be kind to your neighbors.
Yeah.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by
Holy moly, look at this.
Shh! Be quiet!
But this is important stuff.
Look, there is nothing more important than what I am doing right now, reading another mystery by local author Susan L. Perry. I have already finished these, and I've ordered her newest book, The Proof is in the Pudding, on Amazon.
Really, you need to look at this.
Shut up!
Alrighty then.
Alrighty then. For these and other books by author Susan L. Perry, you may order them at Amazon.com or from your local bookstore. For more information about the author, visit her website at www.susanlperry.com.